It is the time of the show where we go from having exuberant time of enjoyment to a wellspring of wisdom.
Oh.
It is.
It is time for Soul Sessions.
That's me playing the big bass guitar there at the end, in case anybody wondered. But I want to talk about, you brought it up earlier, Carson, the debate. And I mentioned it in the service today, and I don't know whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you like our present president or our past president, who some want to be our future president. But either way, they are older gentlemen, and it just really has me thinking about, are those two men the best that we have to offer? And I don't mean their intellect or even their policy. I just mean by their age. Like, how do we more effectively raise up young leaders? And whether it be the next generation of parents or pastors or presidents, 3 Ps. So I wanted to talk about that because I do think that that is really important. And there are lots of books written about the strategy, how do you raise up a leader, right? And I put it like this: how do you raise up next? And there are lots of, you show them and then you do it with them and then they do it and then they watch you, right? All that kind of stuff. So I don't really want to talk about that. I want to talk about the emotional side because I think that's why we struggle to raise up next. And I think that even the two men that represent the two parties, I think this is a real struggle for all of us and can keep us from raising up next. And the next only comes when the present day leaders either fail or they die. That happens in companies, it happens in churches, and it happens in politics. So let's talk about it real quickly, all right? I wanted to give you 3 thoughts as I was thinking about this. And I think if you truly want to be the kind of person that raises up next, and you think about that, do you want your children to go beyond where you've gone? Do you want the next manager, the next owner, the next politician, right? Whatever position it is you hold in life, on your personal side, and then think on your professional side. How do you raise up next? Okay. And whether you've got a big position or a small position, the way to promotion is to raise up next. So how do you do that? And I think the first thing that we all have to do is answer this question, because I think this is what gets in the way of people raising up next is, who are you? Right? Who are you? How do you get your identity? Because a lot of times we get our identity from what we do. I'm the president. I'm the governor. I'm the senator. I'm the pastor. I'm the coach. I'm the athlete. I'm the parent. And we get our identity from what we do. And so I think we have to ask the question, really, what is my value? I remember when I was playing basketball, from the 6th grade until probably, 20, 21, I was known as the basketball player. All the articles in the paper weren't about Troy the person, they were about Troy the basketball player. When I went to college and people would introduce me, they'd say, oh, he plays on our basketball team. So my whole life that I could remember, I was the basketball player. Then when I got hurt and I quit playing basketball, guess what? I was no longer the basketball player. And for the first time in my life, I had to answer that question, who am I, other than a basketball player, right? So that had been my whole identity. And so I think it's really important to ask that question. That's what I wrote down, is how am I more than what I do? And I just challenge all of us to answer that question, right? Who are you? What gives you value? Because if you only get your value from what you do, you'll never let it go. Because you can't. You can't all of a sudden go in from being somebody to being nobody. And if the somebody you are is the result of being the manager of the store or being the owner of the store or being the leader of the team or being a pastor or being a president, whatever it is, you'll never let it go if that all your value goes from being that into that position. So maybe take some time and even list what makes me valuable.
Yeah.
Who am I beyond what I do? And then I think you have to answer this question that goes along with it is, do I love the organization more than my position?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we all say that, right? I love, my family. I love my church. I love my country. I love my business. I love my whatever, right? And we all say it, but I think we really have to ask that question. Am I willing to give up my position for the organization to move forward? And we know for the organization to move forward, there's got to be a next, or it dies. Families die, businesses die, countries die, right? That Rome used to be an incredibly powerful nation. Egypt used to be. The Aztec used to be, right? All of these, but they no longer are. Because somewhere along the way, they quit raising up next. So we got to ask that question. Then secondly, and there's only 3, so it's not going to be forever, okay? But the second one is the idea of, and this is the way I put it, risk empowering others. Risk empowering others. And when it comes to empowering others, the first thing, and these are all in R to make it easy, is just the relationship. You can't raise up somebody you don't know. You can't raise up somebody you're not in relationship with because you're never going to trust them. So you've got to look for those relationships. You've got to invite people into relationship. And I don't mean they have to be your best friend or you got to hang out with them. That I've always been a big proponent in ministry of book studies because it gives me something to invite somebody to.
Mm-hmm.
I can only invite maybe one person to coffee, and that's good, and that's wonderful as well. But beyond that, it's like, how can I gather a group of people so I can enter into relationship to empower them to be next? For me, that's been a book study. You have to decide in your own situation is how do you invite them into relationship? And then not only do you give them a relationship, but you give them responsibility. And again, when I was thinking about this, what does that mean? Because people often give away jobs they don't want to do and call that delegating. But to give responsibility means that you give decision making, that you support. A lot of times what leaders do is they'll give decisions to people, but they never really invest in that decision. It's like, okay, what color do you want the wall to be? And I'm going to empower you to make that decision, and you say you're going to make it blue, but I never really get behind that. So if blue tends to be wrong, then, okay, whatever, because I never truly empowered you to make a decision in the sense that the decision you're making matters, and I'm behind it. And I think we do that in parenting, and we do that in our jobs and in ministry. I know for us, I always leveraged when the kids were young is like what movies are they going to go to? What are good? What's bad? Allowing them, empowering them to make that decision, and so that their decision-making muscles grow. And it's not just our children. Decision-making, there are tons of books written about how to make decisions. And so there's a muscle that has to be developed and grow if next is going to succeed. And so that means not just saying, hey, you get to make the decision. I'm going to live with the decision that you make.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a part of the decision that you make. So you got to give them relationship. You've got to give them responsibility. And then you've got to give them reward. You got to let them be the hero. Let them be the one that everybody applauds, that everybody celebrates. And that means at the exclusion of you. Right? Because you think about our presidents, right? So we got all these different areas in some area. It's letting that person not only make that decision, but be the smart one who made that decision. Not that they carried out your decision, not that they did what you taught them to do. No. I'm trying to empower this person to be next. I'm not just trying to empower this person so my agenda can succeed.
Yeah.
I'm trying to raise them up. And so I'm not only going to give them the responsibility, I'm going to give them the reward.
Yeah.
I'm going to be willing to be seen as somebody who didn't come up with the idea, who wasn't the smartest one in the room. They were. They came up with the idea. They came up with the decision. They came up with all of it. And so I want them to get the reward. I want them to get the pats on the back. I want them to be seen as the leader, the pastor, the one who did it. So you give them relationship, you give them responsibility, you give them reward, and eventually you have to give them release. In other words, you've got to celebrate them pursuing whatever next is. And whether that's next in your organization or like in a family, that's next in their own family. You see lots of parents that struggle to ever release their kids. Their kids are married with kids of their own, and the parents are still controlling their children. Now, and because release is difficult, right? Especially if you've got all this time invested in raising up next. You're like, man, I've invested all this energy and time and money and effort, and now I'm releasing them to pursue, to become their own person. But that's necessary for us to raise up a generation of next. Now, that's what you give them. Here's what you take: the risk. Because we're all individual people. And no matter how good somebody comes across in the relationship, no matter how well they do with the responsibility, when you give them the reward, when you give them to be the one that makes the decisions and gets the reward and is seen the smartest one in the room, they can then fail, right? So there's a risk that you're going to raise up next, and next is going to destroy what you've worked so hard for. That's a risk. They could also take what you've given them. And that can be people, that can be money, that can be position. Right? You see that in companies all the time, where the one who raised up somebody, then that person tries to overthrow the CEO or the manager or whatever it is. That's always a risk. I know in ministry, I've seen that happen, where people who we have raised up will then take people, and when they take people, they take ministry and they take money with them. But if you're unwilling to take that risk, you're never going to raise up next. And ultimately, what you say you care about is going to die. All right? So first of all, you got to answer the question about who you are. We cannot get our identity in what we do, or we'll never release it. Secondly, we've got to do the process of raising them up. We've got to give them a relationship, responsibility, reward. We've got to release them. And we have to be willing, whatever position you're in, the one who's raising up next has to be willing to take the risk. And then lastly, you have to be willing to adjust your role as the organization changes, as you get older, all right? Because as you raise up next, as the organization gets older or it gets bigger, things have to change. I want you to think about it in the form of a parent, but this is true as a pastor, a president, a manager, whatever it is that you lead. Think about how this role changes. First of all, it begins, you're the provider, right? You're the one that started the business. As a parent, you're the one, you had the baby, you got to feed the baby, you got to change the baby, you got to do all of those things. You're providing everything that's needed. You're the one with the vision. You're the one who started, right? You're the manager. You're providing the schedule. You're providing all of the insight. You're the provider. Then you go from being the provider, where now you're the protector. They may be providing some things for themselves. When you think about, again, the parent, you think that children now might be able to fix some waffle. They might be able to go to the bathroom by themselves, but they still need protection so that they can continue to grow and produce. So you go from being the provider to being the protector, and that's different. That's where some parents are still giving their 8-year-old child a bath. Right? They're still providing. They're still tasting their food before they allow them to eat, because they don't move from provider to protector, right? So in protector, you're giving them more responsibility to provide for themselves, but you're making sure that they're not eating dirt, right? You're making sure that they're not getting into a shower that's 110 degrees, but they're the ones taking the shower and cleaning themselves. So you go from provider to protector, then to advisor. So now you're just giving wisdom, right? Now, you've lost a lot of power now, because now you're not in control. You're not the one who is doing. You're not the one who is protecting. You're just advising. You're giving your wisdom. This is a hard step for a lot of people to take, because it's where you feel it, right? You don't have as much control. Therefore, really, in reality, you over that individual, you might still over the organization have power, but over that individual, you don't have the same amount of power. And the same thing happens with parenting, right? Now you're the advisor. Now they're teenagers. Now they're in school. Now they're married, You're just their advisor. You're not deciding how they raise their kids. You're not deciding what profession they go into. You're not deciding what they do with their money. Now, again, parents often struggle just like managers and presidents, where you have a hard time not having that power. I'll help you, but here's what you got to do. I'll pay for it, but here's what you got to do. In other words, I'm not just going to be the advisor and you make the decisions. I'm going to be the advisor, the provider, and the protector, because I'm still going to be in control. And then lastly, and this, again, is a step we often fight, but as you go from being a provider, protector, advisor into the follower, right? Again, if you think about it as parents, you're providing everything for your kids, then you're protecting your kids, then you're advising your kids, and now your kids are the ones who are pursuing, and so now you're following. In other words, you've taken that person in business, and now they're the manager, and you're following their leadership in that department. You may still be the CEO or the lead pastor in my case, but you've so empowered somebody in that area that you're now following their leadership. You have totally empowered them. So, you are, again, I'm not saying you don't ever give any advice, but what I'm saying is a lot of times we don't ever, again, want to release that. We want to be the man. We want to be the woman. We want to be the strong one. And you can see when parents struggle to do that, right? And no longer following their kids, because maybe their kids know more about finances and what's going on in the world, because the parent is, struggling to keep up, maybe physically, maybe emotionally, maybe mentally, but they're still fighting to be in control. I'm the parent, right? And it's like, no. If we do it right, if you've provided and protected and advised, you can trust your kids and follow their advice. And the same thing with the manager or the leader of that ministry department or whatever it is. I think one of the things that we just don't do very well in society, we don't do very well even in the church, is raise up next. And I think a lot of it's just got to do with, it's hard to give up power.
Yeah.
It's hard to give up control.
Yeah.
And you end up, go ahead, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the scary thought is getting towards the end of your time, and I'm not even just saying like here on earth, but at a position or a role and things are moving, or you're getting tired, maybe it's time to retire, whatever it may be, and realizing you don't really know who's going to take that role, because you can't speed up that process.
Right.
There's no like short track or fast track on how to get someone ready for leadership.
Yeah.
And, just that fear that could come upon you, especially with all the work that has gone into something. The last thing you want to feel at the end of that time, you want to be celebrating, not worried or anxious about how it's going to be after you. Because of someone not being ready.
We tend to still do it like the animals do, like gorillas or lions. I was studying like lions because when we went to South Africa, and the way lions do it is you're the leader until the next one comes along and kills you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we tend to do that in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're the leader until somebody beats you. And then that person may be good, they may be bad, they're just stronger than you. And eventually somebody's always going to be stronger than you.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're just going to get older.
Old.
And physically, mentally, however, and then what's that hurts is the organization or the country or the church or whatever.
Well, and if they're, I would imagine at times too, part of the reason we may not want to raise up that next is because it could speed up the process of when it's time for us to be done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We can either let them learn on their own because we know that's a slower process. It gives us more time. But to train that person sets them up quicker to kind of take whatever it is that we're doing that we may not be ready to give up, as you said, when it comes to that control piece.
But ultimately, if we love the organization more than we do our position.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We want the church, we want the country, we want the family, we want the business, we want the department. We want whatever it is that we're leading to win.
Yeah.
And that's a battle. You know what I mean? We're all got skin, and skin, the strongest survives. And we tend to fall into that if we're not really intentional about how we live life. And it's uncomfortable because you're always asking those questions.
Yeah.
As opposed to just believing I'm the best.
Yeah.
You know.
It is an interesting conversation of whether it's, more often seen nowadays of not raising up the next. The average age of the U.S. president is 55. So both of these running presidents are significantly older
Yeah.
than 55.
Well, and you think maybe would their energy be better used giving wisdom to
Advice,
somebody
yeah.
younger?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point.